Hi, everyone, and welcome. Today, we are exploring the concept of matrescence, and it's the often unnamed transition into motherhood that touches the body, the brain, emotions, identity, and relationships. And why this concept matters is when we name matrescence and we talk about it, we help to give mums the understanding and the support they need to thrive in a period of what is, for all of us, profound transformation. So today, for a conversation, I'm joined by Linda. Linda is a qualified life coach for 17 years. She's a mum of 3 daughters, and she's also a matrescence facilitator and coach who supports and guides mothers to navigate their personal motherhood journey. Linda has gained her matrescence accreditation through the Mama Rising program that some of you may be aware of, and it's really enabled her to give a greater depth of knowledge about matrescence and intertwine that in the work she is doing to support mums. So, Linda, thank you so much for joining us for our discussion on matrescence today. And do you have anything that you'd like to add to that short intro?
I know you did beautifully. Thank you, Philippa.
And what we will cover off in our discussion is what is matrescence and the definition of it. What do mums experience in terms of identity and emotions? What support do we need as mums going through all this change? And a couple of little practices that we can use on a daily basis to help support ourselves and manage the changes that we experience as well. So, Linda, in a sentence, can you tell us, please, what is matrescence and what do you most want every parent to know about it?
Okay, so matrescence is a word that describes or defines, as I said, that transition that a woman goes through as she enters and goes through motherhood. And we use the word in the same way that we would use adolescence to describe a child transitioning or transforming into adulthood. So it's really helpful to think about it in that same kind of framework, that it is a transitional time, a time of change. Okay. What do I want everyone to know? Well, that it is a time of transition and a time of change.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because there's so much knowledge and conversation around adolescence. Is matrescence as profound a change as adolescence? Is it as something as serious as adolescence and that we should all know about it? And is there any reason why we don't know as much about it? Well, what can you tell us?
Okay, so yes, it is as profound as adolescence. So it impacts a woman on all the levels that adolescence impacts a child, right? It is our hormones, it's our sense of identity, it's physical, it's the way we position ourselves in the world, the relationships we hold. All of that is impacted just like adolescence. Why don't we know? Why don't we give it the same significance as we're giving adolescence? Partly because really it's very recent that we as a society are recognizing it, naming it, and kind of giving it language. The word matrescence was actually coined back in the 1970s by an anthropologist called Dana Raphael. However, it wasn't really picked up at that time. It wasn't really held onto it and given life. And so it's kind of just sat quietly in books and writings from that time. And it was really only picked up about 6-7 years ago through some other academic work being done in the US by Dr. Orally. So we've kind of had this new finding of something that already existed, life being brought into it. And so now we're creating the language and we're trying to spread the information so that, women can know about this before they enter motherhood. Right?
It's you say that. It's certainly a word that I discovered after I had my child and came across it. And I was like, wow, this word really sums up my entire experience. How did I not know about it? And it really started to put everything that I was going through, which was huge, into perspective. And so what would you say, Linda, are like the big changes that women are experiencing, and that if they're listening to this would recognize that they are, going through and noticing?
Yeah. So I think two things about what you're saying is right now, women are coming to the language and the knowledge of matrescence once they're already in it. Yeah, because we're not educating women early. So we're still in this very reactive phase. And so what happens is they're having the experience of matrescence and not knowing that that's what they're experiencing. So some of the experiences they're having are, sense of who they are has changed. This sense of loss of identity, not recognizing yourself anymore. Changes in your relationships, changes in your values around different things. And because we're not educating women ahead of time, when they're in the middle of that experience and they're yet to discover, yet to learn this word matrescence, what they then feel is that something is wrong with them. They feel like these things that they're experiencing don't align with the expectations or the preconceived ideas of motherhood they had. And so there's a lot of tension and questioning about, why am I feeling all these things? I must be doing something wrong as a woman and as a mother. And nothing could be further from the truth. They're not doing anything wrong. This is actually a very normal experience of this transition.
Yeah. And so what's actually happening? So it's what, hormonal changes, brain rewiring? Talk us through, because it feels like it's a spread of things that's all kind of coming at once.
Yeah. I mean, if you go back and think of adolescence and you think of whatever your own experience of adolescence was, right? Everything is changing. Everything is evolving. Everything is opened up. And the same thing is happening for a woman. Every woman will experience kind of their pain point, I suppose I'm going to call it. So for someone like for me, my pain point was 100% this shift in identity. The feeling that I didn't recognize myself anymore, that I wasn't who I was before. And, that was my pain point. But for somebody else, it might be the shift in their relationship, or it might be an economic pain point. So that it's the same transition like adolescence, but the pain points can be different, just like in adolescence.
Right. And when we go through the shift, sometimes you hear the phrase, you're not the same as you were, but that's okay. Or what do you say to women that are sort of thinking to themselves, I miss the old me, will it ever come back? Or how do they reframe this in their minds so they feel supported?
Okay, so you are not the same anymore is the first thing. And because we're not preparing women that they're going to have this transitional experience, they feel like they're meant to be the same, that they're meant to go back to how they were before they had a baby. And they're not. End of story. So to hold that expectation, right, sets you up for a feeling of failure, that something's wrong with you because you don't go back, right? You have changed. You are evolving. That is the process. So we talk about it in the sort of language of matrescence. We would say that this is an inner split that a woman experiences, where they literally split apart from their pre-baby self and they're moving towards, they're evolving into their post-baby self. And that space in the middle, that transitional time, it can be uncomfortable and confusing and unsettling, because change and transition is. So nothing's wrong. You just need to actually take the journey.
Right. And so that journey is, as you were alluding to before, and in your own experience, one of identity, values shifting, body changing. What are the other things that women can sort of make a nod to to say, actually, that's a natural shift that's unfolding here. Nothing's wrong with me, or it's kind of expected. What else would a woman's experience might consist of?
It might consist in, changes in the way you relate to people. So not just your primary relationship. Obviously, that goes through a time of transition as you enter parenthood, but changes in the way your friendships look and feel, relationships with your immediate family can be shifting and changing because you're shifting and changing. Your spiritual outlook on the world, your sense of self, all of those things are changing.
Yeah, it's quite incredible to think that there is so much change that unfolds, and to not be aware that change is coming up, and then to find yourself in that change. It can be really, really confusing and kind of almost hit you not by surprise, but you just don't know what to do with it all, I think, or how to process it. So having a word like matrescence to kind of at least acknowledge, to say, look, there's something there that's a natural occurrence and every woman goes through. It feels like there's some, it just like anything in life, it helps to put a name on something and then to understand it, right?
Yeah, because by giving it a word, by giving it language, it helps women to know that it's a thing, right? They are going through something. It's not in their head. They're not making it up. They're not, going crazy. It is a thing. And if we have language, it allows us to have conversations about it. And it helps women to realize that they're not alone, because it can feel very lonely and very isolating if you think it's just you.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think if there's any time in one's experience, a time that you can probably have less exposure to your friends and colleagues and things, is that journey through motherhood, because you're so focused on being there for your children and just sleeping and keeping up with life that it's almost an isolating act in a way for a lot of women, especially if they're working full time. So to know that you're not alone through all these things that are changing is just really important, I think. So that's really useful to know. And when it comes to the identity and the emotions of, who am I now? I think it's one thing to probably acknowledge that a lot of women may even grieve their pre-baby self. Can you tell us more a little bit about that, and how do you help women to go, oh my God, I was that before I was a mom and my life's changed? And
so
real.
It's very real. It's very normal, that feeling of grief. And so I think that's the first thing to say, that if a woman is feeling all of those things, that it's normal, but that's okay. And I also feel that the grief is amplified because she hasn't been prepared for the fact that this change is coming. And so she's entered motherhood with these sort of external beliefs that nothing's going to change, and I'm just going to have this baby, and then I'm just going to be how I was before. And then that's not what happens. And then we say, oh, but it's okay. It's this thing called matrescence. You're meant to go through that. And the feeling is kind of like, well, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you prepare me for this so that I could feel less hijacked, less blindsided by this journey?
And I think society doesn't help, does it? Because we're always led to believe that when we're a mum, we're a super mum, we can do everything, nothing's going to hold us back.
Yeah.
And in parts of our lives, we're not held back, but in other areas, we might be. And I think just knowing that, you know what I mean, things will be different or be changing, and to be open to that will just help the journey so much more. And
and to shift our perspective that different doesn't mean bad, right? So just because things are changing and continue to change doesn't mean there's something wrong. Doesn't mean, and the person that you are growing into, to really embrace that, to be excited by that, to be curious about, who am I evolving into? Which parts of, it's not like the old you just totally vanishes and no part of her ever exists ever again. Even though you feel a bit disconnected maybe for a while, it's kind of curious about, well, which parts of her will weave through into this new version of me? Which parts get to just sit and be part of a different time, but to kind of relish that and embrace that rather than this sense of deep loss that, we've lost ourselves somehow. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so talk us through how it's also possible for a lot of women for their values and priorities to shift, but then they're still as ambitious as they ever were, right? Because then that's sometimes a huge tension, isn't it?
It is a huge tension. And there are two elements of this. So one element is about kind of the expectations that we have or that our society has, and these expectations that we're going to be able to 100% sit in both, our career and our motherhood spheres, and that's not actually a very helpful expectation to hold, because they do hold tension to each other and they will kind of push and pull with each other along the way. And we've actually got to allow that for them to work together, rather than trying to set them off against each other and hold them up. But the emotional element, or the sort of process of it, is what I would call maternal ambivalence. And ambivalence being, the experience of holding two very different emotions or thoughts simultaneously, but that also might feel that they're in conflict to each other. And so this feeling of, a mother might be feeling that they really want more time with their child, they're something they really are craving, part of their value system, and yet simultaneously they have great ambition at work, they want to thrive in that environment. And so part of it is saying to women, ambivalence, maternal ambivalence, is normal. It is a really normal part of the experience. And so rather than that sense of fight between the two elements, is to acknowledge that they actually both sort of sit and spin next to each other. I sort of imagine them like, two turntables spinning next to each other that need to coexist.
Yeah. And this is a bit of a tangent, but is that where kind of, I guess, is where guilt can sometimes be held? So the guilt of not being one or more of the other, if you're seeing your two kind of roles not either integrate or irreconcilable from a tension perspective.
Yeah, and I think a lot of guilt comes from unrealistic expectations that we bring to motherhood and to our journey. And, we've all done that, because it's very much part of the society that we live in, that's setting us up to believe that, we can be all of these things all the time perfectly. And it's like, no, that's actually not how life unfolds. So that guilt comes from thinking that we should, and then when we don't, we feel bad about what's not happening in the middle.
And so you mentioned sort of some sort of language around sort of navigating those emotions and shifts in identity. Is there any tools or anything that you sort of often refer any mums to when it comes to not feeling comfortable or accepting their identity now versus the old one?
Not so much tools, but I think that a lot of it comes down to doing some reflective work on, what are the beliefs that you've brought in to this experience about what it looks like to be a good mother, to be a good employee, to be, these places, and to, having conversations with others, with a coach, writing in a journal, and really exploring what were those expectations. Are they fair and reasonable expectations to still hold? And perhaps how would I like to rewrite them? How would I like to create something that actually works better for me now that I'm in this process?
That's actually quite interesting, because again, I think sometimes we hold society's expectations, right, of who we should be or who we feel we need to be, especially when it tries to, I don't know, at least play out in our experiences of needing to do things when maybe we don't actually have to. So that reflection, I think, exercises and journaling is actually a really great, useful and helpful idea.
Mm. One of my favourite things too is to remind mums to let go of the sense of perfectionism in our journey. That's another part of those expectations, is like you don't have to be perfect ever at anything, and you will still be wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And thinking about the fact that it's just not us going through matrescence, but it's everyone that is really near and dear to us, whether it's our partners or our friends or even our managers at work. What can they be doing to help support mums through matrescence, whether it's asking for the help or whether it's informing or sharing awareness of matrescence? What would you say?
Look, obviously sharing awareness and having all people in our lives aware is helpful, right? Because it gives us, again, this ability to talk the same language with each other. But in terms of what to do, I would honestly say, if you are the partner, the family, the friend, the manager, simply say to a woman, how would you like to be supported right now? Or if you were to feel better supported in this environment, work, home, whatever it is, what would that look like for you right now? Now, she might not know the answer in that moment, right? That's okay.
Yeah.
But by opening that question, it allows her to reflect on that. It allows her to feel like she can ask for some form of support that she needs, and that it will be an open conversation. Matrescence isn't something that we fix. It's not a problem that we're going to solve. So what we're trying to do is create environments for the woman where she can navigate her transition in a supportive and open way.
Yeah. And I think also when a woman understands the concept of matrescence and understands the changes that she's experiencing and being able to recognize them, that also can certainly lead to asking or reaching out to a friend for support, right? So more easily recognizing, actually, I feel like my identity shifted, something's changed here, and being able to have a conversation is a huge step forward as opposed to just shouldering and going through that experience alone.
100%. Yeah.
And as we go through matrescence and experience all these feelings and all these sort of unique experiences, what are the things that women can do to help support them themselves, whether it's holding a boundary or a daily practice? I mean, there's so much going on when we're mums, and often we're feeling so overwhelmed with things. What are some of the things that you would advise mums to do as a practice or ask for?
Okay. Firstly, I'm going to come back to that point of it doesn't have to be perfect. Yeah, releasing those expectations goes a very long way to just softening how we're feeling in our journey. In terms of, there's so much talk about, self-care for mums, right? And so I'm not gonna sit here and say, oh, you should, I don't know, have more bubble baths. But what I'm going to say around that is something is always better than nothing. So often, women think, oh, I really miss going to my weekly yoga class, or I really miss being able to go for a long walk on the beach, or whatever it is that might have cared for you before. And so I always say something is better than nothing. So it might be 5 minutes of stretching on the floor while a toddler crawls all over you. But that is better for yourself and your sanity than doing nothing. One of my favorite practices, though, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, is to try and return myself to a state of being rather than a state of doing. So instead of more lists and more outcome task orientated things, I will start my day by just reflecting on how I want to feel or show up in my day. And I will sit and reflect on the words, today I choose. And I will let a word come to me, and it might be, today I choose calm. Today I choose spontaneity. Today I choose joy. Whatever it is that I feel would support my well-being. And then as I navigate my day, and I start to feel that tension, that overwhelm, I just return myself to that statement. Today I choose. And it just helps me to just soften. Yeah.
I love that. I think that's really powerful because, as moms, we're in from one thing to the next, and often we're being reactive most of the time, and just a one word trigger, if we can get it, can be that can be really really impactful and really support you. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for that. I mean, we could talk about this for hours, couldn't we? It just it's such an interesting concept. I think what can be, again, something that's really powerful is just women talking about this concept more frequently, more openly, in just our everyday language.
Yep.
And helping others understand what that is. So as we draw our conversation to a close, I'd like to ask you again, Linda, what is the one thing that every new mother should be told about matrescence on day one? Because then it helps us to kind of find a short definition of it that we can pass on to as many mums as we come across or meet or talk to.
Yeah. So every mother on day one needs to know that matrescence is a time of change and transition. Matrescence will happen to each of us, and that it's not to be feared. There's nothing wrong with you, and therefore surrender to it.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way of putting it, right? It's just accepting who we are now and accepting the season that we're in, and giving ourselves the space to just be within that. So thank you. Thank you for sharing all of those insights. It's really amazing to have your wealth of knowledge being shared with us today. And we'll also welcome you back next year for a deeper session exploring matrescence, and that's for our community of mums within Wellspirit that will be returning to work. So we'll have more of a return to work spin as mums not only transition through motherhood, but also make that return to work transition. So that will be really exciting. So if anyone's returning to work or recently returned to work and is looking for more peer support, coaching support, and knowledge that can help with things from confidence to better understanding matrescence and the changes that we're going through, then please find out more at wellspirit.com. And if you're interested in Linda and her coaching, Linda, where would people find you online?
They can either come to my website, which is lindaonthego.com, or they can find me on socials on Instagram or Facebook.
Great. Well, thank you, Linda, for joining me for this really important conversation today. And thank you again for sharing all your knowledge and insights. So have a great day.